Over 20 years have passed since the United States adopted the E-Government Act of 2002, intended to push federal agencies into the digital age. Yet decades later, only a handful of federal sites are truly user-friendly, modern, and easy to understand. User satisfaction with government online services has fallen to a historic low, lagging far behind the private sector. It's frustrating and disappointing to see that the digital doors to public services seem hastily nailed together, creaking and unreliable. To understand the drama behind outdated design, let's dive into its roots, explore the underlying causes and contradictions, and see if there's a glimmer of hope. Many of these problems stem from decisions made or not made in the very early days of the internet. Budgets were tight, technology was rapidly evolving, and the long-term implications of these early choices weren't fully understood. Government agencies' first forays into the online world were like timid experiments. In 1994, the White House launched its first website, at a time when there were only about 10,000 websites worldwide. Web design back then was primitive. Static pages, simple tables, minimal graphics. A bureaucratic approach felt natural. Websites were seen as bulletin boards or digital archives, where the main thing was just to post information, with little thought given to how it looked. As the internet spread in the 2000s, the US and European governments started talking about electronic government. It seemed like evolution was coming. Information portals, online services, more engagement with citizens. In practice, though, progress was slow. Laws and initiatives kept popping up, like the American E-Government Act of 2002 or the European e-Europe strategies. But the spirit of bureaucracy found its way into the digital sphere as well. For a long time, government websites remained similar to their paper predecessors, text-heavy, structurally complicated, and stuck in the early internet design era. Even by 2010, the situation was bleak. Information Week published a dirty dozen list of the worst government websites, which included the City of Los Angeles site, the State of Illinois pages, and even the website of the Federal Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit. Europe wasn't far behind. In Spain, for example, users frequently complained about official sites as ugly and barely functioning. A symbolic climax came in 2013 when the launch of healthcare.gov turned into a nightmare. After 3 years of development and a budget ballooning from $464 million to $824 million, the system was riddled with massive bugs, turning a well-intentioned idea into a national scandal. This historical backdrop shows that the problem has been brewing for decades, sustained by the same bureaucratic roots. So, if these bureaucratic systems are so prone to problems, why haven't they changed? What keeps this outdated design in place? The answer lies in the deeper layers of government philosophy and sociology. Bureaucratic philosophy is based on stability, order, and accountability. Government websites aren't designed for artistic flair, but for following protocol and serving millions of citizens equally. From a bureaucrat's point of view, the priority is it works and it meets regulations. Innovation is often seen as an unnecessary risk. This conservative mindset leads to designs created under the principle better boring than risky. The anthropological dimension is about organizational culture. Government agencies evolved as hierarchical structures, with every step regulated and accountability strictly divided. This environment makes design a kind of collective ritual. Endless approvals, sign-offs, and fear of deviating from the prescribed formula. Here, Nassim Taleb's idea from his book Skin in the Game comes into play. When the system is exclusively focused on preserving the status quo, no one is truly willing or able to take a risk. Accountability is spread across hundreds of people, so there's no single owner of the final result. The system remains conservative because everyone's afraid to be the one who takes the initiative. Nobody has either the authority or the expertise to do so, while the actual implementers are kept far from end outcomes. This culture, described long ago by Max Weber, is like a machine, efficient yet lacking flexibility or creativity. New ideas often get stuck, tangled up in an ocean of rules. It's no surprise that the rigid inflexibility of bureaucracy can stifle creative potential. Organizations get used to their own rhythm, and any deviation, like a bold design choice or an unconventional interface, can be rejected by the immune system of established guidelines. There are also sociological factors. Government sites serve the full range of society, from tech-savvy youth to senior citizens, from business people to low-income households. Trying to satisfy absolutely everyone often yields a watered-down design. with no spark. The public also keeps a close eye on government spending. Big budgets for a fancy website can easily spark outrage about misuse of funds. So it's easier for officials to avoid standing out. Better to leave the old stuff than to justify the new. Add to that the brain drain. Talented UX UI designers typically prefer private tech firms over government service. As a result, agencies sometimes lack the specialists needed to create user-friendly, human-centered websites. The sociology of a large bureaucracy follows its own logic. Maximum caution, minimal risk, balancing many interests, but sadly at the cost of user experience. Behind the scenes of government IT departments lies a hidden drama, the clash of creator versus enforcer. Picture a young government designer eager to build a website that's modern, dynamic, and user-friendly. They have bold ideas, fresh color highlights, intuitive navigation, mobile responsiveness. But then they run into a swarm of strict regulations. At a meeting they hear, security standards must be maintained. Content has to go through legal review. Colors must match heraldic requirements. Enlarge the font. What if seniors can't read it? And a dozen other arguments. Meanwhile, the people giving these comments often have no direct contact with the designer. In fact, they might not realize the designer has already planned special modes for the visually impaired or other accessibility features. As a result, there's a miscommunication. The core concept stalls under endless clarifications, and practical solutions that could simplify the interface never even get considered. This disconnect between designers and decision makers can lead to absurd and even project-killing situations. I experienced this firsthand. I once led a design team at a contracting firm working on an interface for a government agency. I can't name them due to an NDA. Our contract was ultimately terminated not because of design flaws, but because of scheduling conflicts with a single meeting room in the new government building. Protocol dictated we could only use that specific room for meetings with all required personnel. No in-person meetings outside that room, no remote calls from our offices. After several attempts and cancellations, we ran out of time and the contract was automatically terminated. There was no way around these rules, and it seemed like we, the designers, were the only ones truly invested in finding a solution. This situation leads to a psychological tension in the designer. Their creativity feels like a bird trapped behind the glass walls of bureaucracy. On one hand, they want a design that's beautiful and user-friendly. On the other, they're afraid of breaking any rules. Granted, some requirements are genuinely justified, like security or accessibility for people with disabilities, but many are outdated leftovers or a product of overcaution and poor leadership. Developers end up building big, clunky frameworks just to meet a mountain of rules. And somewhere along the line, the interface loses its simplicity and human touch. Not surprisingly, there's extreme risk aversion in this environment. Projects drag on for years, months are lost in reviews. By the time something launches, the technology is already old. Any new idea draws the question, what if it goes wrong? Under the watchful eyes of the press and auditors, officials prefer stability over innovation. Researchers point out that when stability is prized above all, a total avoidance of risk can choke out creative potential. In the end, you get a compromise product, a reliable, like a monthly report, but just as soulless. This tension between regulations and creativity is a true tragedy for government web design. Every new feature has to be fiercely fought for, justified, watered down until its original sparkle is gone. Fear and control outweigh the freedom to dream, and government sites remain behind the curve. By the way, if you have a design department of 4+ people and want to adopt new tech, we offer an AI transformation for such teams, boosting productivity by 40%. It's $17,000 with a money-back guarantee if you are not satisfied. Check the link in the description if you want to leap into the future ahead of public agencies. To really grasp the scale of the problem, just look at specific examples on both sides of the Atlantic. In the US, the private sector is known for its cutting-edge tech, but government UX sometimes seems stuck in another era. Multiple agencies have developed their sites over decades, each in isolation with no unified standard. Until recently, fewer than 20% of federal web resources in the US conformed to a unified design system, the US Web Design System, resulting in a wild zoo of styles. For example, Medicare's site looked and worked totally differently than the IRS site. As a result, citizens encounter a scattered experience. Every government site feels like a whole new, unfamiliar resource. Ignoring modern best practices for so long has left many crucial sites behind in even the basics of usability. According to official data, only about 30% of federal websites have no major accessibility issues. That means 70% of them have problems or barriers violating accessibility requirements. The mobile era also caught agencies off guard. Just over half of US government websites are mobile-friendly, whereas in the private sector, a mobile version is long a must-have. It's no shock that satisfaction ratings are on the decline. Forrester estimates that the user experience quality provided by federal agencies is 11 points lower on average than in the private sector, a huge gap felt by millions. In Europe, the situation is similar, though it varies country by country. Spain is notoriously known for clunky school enrollment portals. Users joke that it takes 3 evenings just to submit an application. Official sites, they have been criticized as ugly and dysfunctional so frequently that the pandemic only doubled the complaints. Other countries fare better, like the UK, where in 2012 the government consolidated thousands of scattered sites into the unified gov.uk portal with a simple minimalist design that won the Design of the Year 2013 award. But Europe still has its fair share of conservative corners, where government pages look like they're from the early 2000s, with outdated graphics and clumsy navigation. Some examples are downright tragicomic. Even in Estonia, a nation famous for its digital government, an agency a few years back released an online educational game with archaic graphics for 250,000 euros of public money. It drew so much criticism for its horrifying appearance that it became a running joke. Such cases show it's not about a lack of funding or technology. The real problem is the approach. Budgets can get used up, but without the right vision and culture, there's no real result. After all, design is born where there's room for experimentation, and efficiency arises where there's competition. Government systems often run like monopolies, building a protective cage around each move. That cage keeps fresh ideas from ever seeing the light of day. Research is clear. Bureaucracy directly affects the quality of UX/UI in government systems. The more sluggish and complicated internal processes are, the more frozen in time the end product becomes. For instance, the average government procurement cycle for software is so long and unwieldy that by the time it's installed, the tech can already be outdated. Surveys show that government software projects focus on meeting formal requirements and cutting costs rather than prioritizing usability. Cheap vendors might save money up front, but citizens and the agencies themselves pay later in wasted time and stress caused by mediocre interfaces. The numbers are sobering. In 2015, the US federal government spent about $61 billion just maintaining outdated IT systems. Huge sums mostly going to patch up holes and keep ancient interfaces running. Meanwhile, investment in truly improving the user experience was negligible. Unsurprisingly, by 2022, public satisfaction with US government digital services hit a historic low. For 5 years in a row, ratings steadily fell until the White House raised the alarm. The president openly admitted that federal services are severely behind in user-friendliness and need to catch up with the private sector. We can see the effects of bureaucracy even at a technical level. Only 40% of federal websites have connected to the centralized DAP analytics program to track user activity. The remaining 60% either haven't managed or haven't bothered to analyze how people use their sites. And without that data, improving UX is tough. Accessibility requirements for people with disabilities have officially been in place since 1998 by Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. But in practice, only 30% of sites meet those standards in full. So even the bureaucracy's own oversight mechanisms seem to be stalling. In Europe, the stats tell a similar story. According to the European Commission, on average, about 80% of key public services in the EU are online, but that doesn't guarantee they're user-friendly. Various usability studies in Italy, Spain, and other countries reveal significant difficulties for users, including confusing structures or technical glitches. So yes, websites exist on paper, but their usability often limps along in reality. And once again, it's bureaucratic inertia at the core. If a document needs 5 signatures, no improvement sees the light of day until it's done. Time slips by and trust keeps eroding as people either struggle through or just give up on digital government services, preferring to go back to the old-fashioned office visit where at least a real person can help. But this doesn't have to be the end of the story. The dramatic conclusion hasn't been written yet, but the path to a solution is beginning to show under the spotlight. Understanding that outdated design isn't due to a lack of technology, but to culture and process means we can target our efforts more precisely. What can we do? First and foremost, we need to dismantle the bureaucratic barriers locking down digital transformation. Experts call for eliminating unnecessary regulations and reforming procurement so new technologies aren't held back. Legislation like the American 21st Century IDEA 2018 is on the right track. It requires agencies to prioritize modern UX and mobile compatibility. But now we need real political will to make sure these laws actually get followed. Congress and European parliaments should update rules to promote flexibility and innovation while keeping security and accessibility as important but realistic goals, not bureaucratic choke points. It's just as crucial to change the culture from within. Here we look to examples of creative bureaucracy, where government bodies form teams that are truly user-centric. In the US, after the healthcare.gov fiasco, the US Digital Service was created, bringing in top tech talent from Silicon Valley. Groups like 18F appeared, promoting the principle fund product teams, not projects. In other words, give people the freedom to keep improving a service instead of working off a one-time spec. In the UK, the Government Digital Service showed that even a very traditional system can evolve if the goal is to make the service so good that everyone who can use it will want to use it. Government Digital Service pulled designers, developers and researchers into small cross-functional teams that made a real difference. Millions of users noticed. Estonia, Denmark and Australia are on similar paths, betting on user-centric design and seeing tangible progress. We're also entering a new chapter, the AI era. Big companies are already incorporating voice assistants, machine learning chatbots and content generation tools. This totally changes the user experience. No need to wade through clunky pages because an AI agent can answer your questions on the spot. And government sites can either be left behind for good and turn into digital newspapers, or they can make a quantum leap forward, skipping multiple development steps. But again, that requires leadership brave enough to tolerate mistakes and truly prioritize citizens' convenience. A crucial step is institutionalizing UX/UI. Design shouldn't be an afterthought. It needs to be a priority on par with drafting laws or managing budgets. That means hiring professional designers, training staff in UX principles, and regularly doing user testing with real citizens. Government must learn to listen to its users. Right now, with 60% of websites ignoring analytics tools, that seems far off. Finally, we need to replace a culture of fear with a culture of creativity. Mistakes happen. It's something the private sector embraced long ago with the fail fast, learn faster mentality. In government, however, fear of making a mistake can be paralyzing. That mindset must go. Trying new ideas on small pilot projects allows quick testing, fixes, and forward motion. Leaders should confidently say, give it a shot, do it differently, we'll back you. When that becomes normal, bureaucratic design will start to melt away. Ultimately, the solution is to put people at the center of digital government again, while keeping bureaucracy's best qualities, order and reliability, but shedding its worst constraints. Then a happy ending becomes possible. Government websites go from being a source of frustration to a source of pride and trust. And if you'd like to stay ahead of aging bureaucracy right now, we offer AI transformation for design teams, more than 4 people for $17,000. No red tape, no excuses, just a genuine 40% productivity boost and a money-back guarantee. Look for the link in the description if you're curious. That approach can finally get us out of the maze, so that instead of a painful ordeal, accessing government services and anything else becomes quick, easy, and maybe even a pleasure. Learning from organizations that have successfully navigated these complexities is essential. Even large structured companies, not so different from government in terms of regulations and processes, can provide valuable insights. Apple, for instance, offers a masterclass in differentiating between when to innovate and when to maintain stability. This subtle distinction is what separates effective design approaches from ineffective ones. To delve into this crucial skill, we highly recommend watching our video, Why Apple Doesn't Care About iPhone Design Anymore. Click the link and see how mastering this principle can elevate your design expertise.